The passive income happens in very small margins, right? You're going to get these drips of passive income, and over time they do accumulate. They do have a snowball effect. But the active income, they happen in very large volumes and quantities. You can go, if you're a business owner, you can go earn $50,000 this week. And it's a lot quicker to do that than it would be to try and get $50,000 through investing.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Jerry Fetta, who's going to share how to build wealth. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Elbert Hubbard. The world is moving so fast these days that the man who says it can't be done is generally interrupted by someone doing it. How often do you hear people say it can't be done? That's not possible. Well, as Albert says, somebody's doing it. Why not you? We're going to chat about that today with our guest. Before we do, last week's action step was 3 different action items. Number 1 was the life and death exercise. What do you love? What brings you life? Add that to your life. What do you hate? Get rid of it. Let somebody else do it for you. Commit to finding your zone of genius and go live it. I have to tell you, when you find your zone of genius, it's beautiful. Life gets wonderful. Last, work on your money story. We're going to chat about that today as well. So, since we're focused on money skills today, I recently heard a tip. Said installment loans are trading your future income for today's gratification. It seems so simple to take out a loan, and without much consequence. Do it enough time, and your future's going to suck. And it's going to happen all at once when something goes wrong. Don't put yourself on a weak foundation. Make sure you have a solid foundation. That's what an emergency fund is. Don't trade your future success for a moment of fun today that you won't remember tomorrow. Our chat today is on basic wealth building and what works. As you hear Jerry's story, think about where he started and where he ended up. It did not take him long to make that change. Listen in to see how much of an investment he made in himself to achieve those goals. Jerry Fetta helps make finance simple, true, and applicable. Is the founder and CEO of DynamX, a financial firm that helps thousands of clients across the U.S. build wealth. Jerry has a passion for providing financial education for families so they can become solvent and achieve greater financial freedom in life. He's married to his wife and business partner, Lexy, and they have already achieved financial independence before the age of 30. He wants to help you do the same. Let's meet Jerry. Welcome to Richer Soul, Jerry Fetta. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you, Rocky. It's great to be here.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I had a good childhood. My parents, they were not very good with money. So the things that I learned were more from observation. So we were definitely a lower class family. My parents had maybe a household income of maybe $30,000. And so, I learned money was something to be frugal with. It was something to stress out about. It was something to fight about. And actually, when I was 8, my 8-year-old summer was kind of an intense year. We lost the house, we got the car repoed, and my parents got divorced all over money in that same summer. And then we spent the following months homeless, sleeping in a tent. So I didn't learn much about it from a strategic standpoint, but I did have a lot of, things I observed about it.
So did you realize you were homeless? Or were you just
at
having
the time?
Fun?
I didn't. I thought we were camping. It was great. I was, 8 years old. We spent 6 weeks living in a tent, and I was like, this is awesome.
It's funny how little kids adapt to certain things, and they have a different frame of reference there.
Yeah, and it kind of speaks to, even though we weren't doing well with money, my parents still were able to make life fun, interesting, give us experiences. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun that summer when we were quote unquote camping. So, it goes to show that, the old cliche is money can't buy everything. There are certain things that you can get done regardless of whether you have means or not.
And I can see why that was a pretty stressful time with regards to money and everything else, because, you got that triple whack. So what happened next?
Yeah. So my parents got divorced, and so I grew up doing spending time at my mom's house and my dad's house and doing the custody thing. And, my dad, I think he worked 3 or 4 jobs to be able to support us, doing taxi driving, cleaning buildings and janitorial. He had a handyman and a painting business. And on my mom's side, she did, I think, some school teaching and like recess monitoring and stuff with the school district. But on that end, we did a lot of reliance on charities, churches, subsidy programs. I was a free lunch kid growing up, that type of thing. And so after that, I kind of had all of these, I think afterwards, more negative experiences because of the way life was due to the lack of money. And actually, I remember at the age of 17 or 18, I got my first job delivering pizza. And someone had told me the dollar's not backed by gold. And I don't know why that mattered to me at the age of 17, but it did. And I made the conscious decision that I was not going to pursue money, and I wasn't going to, play the rat race game if it was just monopoly money.
So why did that matter, though?
I'm not totally sure. So I think I related it to monopoly, and I realized, monopoly is made up. I think the box even says the banker can issue as many dollars as they could. So I think I realized somehow in some way that money really was just an idea. Sure, we used it, but if it wasn't backed by anything of real value, my thought was I would rather just go enjoy life. I would rather, not worry about it, spend my time doing what I liked instead of chasing a dollar down and trying to, please someone else and live their way so that I could have, those dollars if they didn't actually have any value behind them.
So in a sense, was that anti-consumerism?
In a sense, I don't think I thought that. I was a C average kid in high school, that lived back in the sticks in rural Alaska. So I don't think I thought I was going to be a minimalist or anti-consumer. I think I just realized like, okay, my parents, most of their stress and most of my stress growing up was due to money. So if it's got no value, why would I want to be involved in it? And so I think that's where my mindset was at the time. And I tell my clients, my audience all the time with finances, we all really have 3 decisions we can make at any given time. We can choose denial, which is what a lot of people do, right? In denial, we'll sweep it under the rug, pretend life is just fine, even though we're paycheck to paycheck or swimming in debt or whatever might be happening. The other option is poverty, right? We can just unplug, kind of like I was making at that time in my life, and we're not going to do anything with this money stuff and just be done with it. And then the other one we can make is we can make the decision of wealth and abundance. I'm going to get enough in my life that I don't have to worry about it. It's kind of like oxygen. I don't count my breaths. I don't worry about how much is out there. It just is there for me to use and consume and let go of when I don't need it anymore.
So it sounds at that age, though, was it more the poverty or just not worrying? Because it didn't sound like you were at that abundance stage yet.
I wasn't at the abundance stage. So I didn't realize yet that I was making the poverty decision. that decision over the next 2 or 3 years would lead to me when I got married. My wife and I got married right out of high school. So I'm 19, she's 18. We spent the first 6 months of our marriage living in a extra bedroom in my mom's apartment. Very awkward as a newlywed. And then after that, some weird stuff had happened. We had to move out of the apartment. We actually spent, I believe, 3 or 4 months of our marriage, like right after, homeless, squatting in an abandoned house. And that was the moment that I realized, okay, whether I like it or not, the economics thing is real, and it's going to drag me along kicking and screaming if I don't take control of it and learn how it works.
So what happened next?
We lived there for about 3 months, and basically we were sleeping on a mattress in a room upstairs. And one Sunday morning I woke up and I heard noises, right? And so it was kind of in the woods a little bit. I thought maybe someone had broken in. It turned out that the people that owned the house were selling it, and they had no idea we were living there. And so I'm sitting there in the bed kind of listening, and I see the door open up and this lady pops her head in, and then she quickly like runs down the stairs, and I hear her saying like, "Hey, there's people sleeping upstairs." So we get out of bed and I go downstairs and I see there's, like 3 or 4 people down there, like moving things and like packing up boxes. And I guess they were the kids of the guy that owned the house. He had ended up in a nursing home. They were selling it. And nobody knew we were living there. And basically it was kind of like this, like, why are you guys in our house moment? So, and you may have experienced not this, but like situations that are so awkward, it's hard to really confront what's happening. It was one of those. So I tried to just like go on like nothing was happening. I started cooking breakfast. I think I offered them some eggs. And at some point they were finally just like, "Hey, cut the crap. Like, you guys shouldn't be here. We need you out by Friday." And at that point, we basically had to move out. My wife's mom, my mother-in-law, was kind enough to help us get into an apartment at that time in our life. That was the moment where I was like, okay, I costed someone else money, my mother-in-law at that time, and I need to start figuring this out and being more responsible with finances. And I was probably 20 at that time.
So you're still in Alaska, right?
I'm in Florida now.
Oh.
I'm a reformed Alaskan.
No, now, but at 20, were you in Florida?
At 20, I was in Alaska.
Yeah, so I'm thinking it gets cold there. Like, was there heat in that house?
Luckily, there was heat. None of the utilities had been shut off. So I think they were maintaining it at least, and we were able to keep warm. There were some groceries in the freezer as well. So we kind of lived off of their groceries, kept their heat on for a couple of months. And yeah.
So you're 20, you're out of the house and you got yourself an apartment. What happens next?
Yeah. So from there, Rocky, ironically, I was in financial services. I was learning how to be a financial advisor while all of that was happening. And so for me, that was really a wake up call of, okay, I need to get my stuff in order and start actually walking the walk a little bit better with finances. So I started learning about some basics, budgeting. I started putting in more hours at work. My wife did as well. And we really started to make a point of living more responsibly with finances. I would say that the methods and strategies were more to create just basic solvency. We weren't doing any investing or wild things. It was just like, okay, we need to earn more than we spend, and we need to know where our money goes at the end of the month, and we need to have savings. And that was really where my focus went to. So I did that, and really that was easy. It was much easier than I thought it was going to be. And so we ended up building some good habits. And then from there, I started growing my business. My income really increased. And I was able to start being a lot more strategic and getting more and more in the realm of building financial freedom at that time.
So how long did it take you to kind of get yourself on solid ground and change the way you looked at things and make that switch?
I would say it was a gradual process over maybe about 2 years, right? So I went from, homeless, living in an abandoned house to about 2 years later, really focusing on growing my income. And, building out that, you maybe would call it an abundance mindset, looking at, okay, well, instead of trying to monitor the things that I don't have and live in scarcity, let me just go create more. And so that was really where I got, focused on things like personal development, learning how to communicate, learning how to sell, learning how to market, learning how to add value to other people. And all of those things led to my income really growing on a very exponential level. So, for me, I think my dad, the most I ever saw him make in a year was like $40,000 or $50,000. And so that was my target. And so I remember I actually hit that in like 2015. And prior, I'd only ever made 20, 30 grand a year. So I doubled my income and I thought 50,000 was a lot. And so at that point I looked at, okay, I hit my target, it's that moment of like, well, what now? Right. And so then I had to start thinking bigger and going from, okay, well, I have that foundation. Now, where do I want to take this to?
So you talked about self-development. Was there somebody or different groups that you were following? Was that something that they provided through where you were working? Where did that come from?
There wasn't a lot at that time. This was back in probably 2013, 2014. So social media was still relatively new. There wasn't Facebook groups, masterminds. There was no Instagram, stories where I could follow an influencer and find an online mentor. So I used audible.com initially. I was a pizza delivery driver at nighttime. And so I would, try and run my business during the day. At night, I would go sling pizzas around Wasilla, Alaska until the wee hours of the morning. And I would just listen to audios and podcasts. And I probably did that 40 hours a week. So, I was a pizza driver for maybe 2.5 years. I figure I probably have a college degree under my belt just in books and podcasts and personal development that I listened to.
So you didn't go to college then?
I didn't go to college, no. Okay. And I knew in high school I didn't want to. I had that conversation with my mom where I was like, I didn't like high school. Why would I go do college?
And that makes sense. You didn't miss anything.
That's what I hear.
Except a whole lot of debt, right?
Crippling student loan debt. Man, I missed it.
So at some point you left Alaska and you ended up in Florida.
Yeah, that was recent. We moved about 2 years ago. We spent a year in California and then we're in Florida now.
Okay. So let's just kind of fill in the gap between you hit your 50,000 and then you set your sights for more. What have those couple of years been like?
Yeah, so I hit the 50,000, I think back in 2015. My business now is a multiple 7-figure a year company. And so I'm 29, turning 30 this year. And so basically we've been able to grow into a national company. We have clients in almost all 50 states. And so it's a very, very expansive project. Like we're working on hiring right now, bringing in more executives and really growing things even further. But it's been great. And it's been something where, exponentially, it's just gotten better and better. You see these increases, and year over year, the further I've gotten into it, the more those increases have been. So that's been great. And my big focus is, for myself, obviously achieving, financial independence. I call that passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. And so I'm on my way to achieving that, and then helping my clients do the same thing, whether they're, starting out like I did, or they're high income earners and they're doing the right things, but maybe they're not doing the right things with the right tools. And so we kind of work with our clients on helping them kind of build that same pathway.
And so you recently wrote a book actually on how to create wealth. What was the reason behind writing the book?
So when I started learning all this, there wasn't a simple pathway to follow, right? There were a lot of different voices out there. They all said conflicting things. And so for me, it was actually a point of confusion. I would read, one person and he would say, do this, this, and this. And then I would read another person that was just as credible and they'd say, do the exact opposite. And so it was kind of like I didn't know which one to do. And when I started figuring it out for myself, and that's what it came down to, is I need to figure out what works for me, not what other people think works for me. And the best source that I knew to go to was those that I knew for sure had built wealth. So I spent several years studying the historical top 1% and looking at statistically, historically, what did they actually do? What tools did they actually use? What are the things that they stayed away from? And so I was able to come up with a pretty good strategy and idea of what that looks like. And so in my book, I first started following that. And it's one of those things where I saw instant results. The things that were supposed to happen as a result of doing X, Y, and Z did happen. And so I could see an absolute cause and effect there. And so I was able to write that up as a strategy. And okay, here's what I did, but it's not even my strategy. Here's where I got it from. And here's what the historical wealthy of this country have done.
So what have the wealthy stayed away from?
The biggest thing that I think that I've seen they stay away from is retail financial products. They're not big on mutual funds, annuities, index products. A lot of them are more focused on, if you look at their net worth, most of it's actually small business equity. That's the biggest chunk you're going to see. And so that can mean that they started their own company or they got into venture capitalism on some level. You're also going to see a lot of hard assets, real estate, physical assets, gold, silver. They do get into individual stocks and bonds at a certain point, but it's not from a standpoint of being a dilettante and dabbling and getting a little bit for the sake of diversification. It's kind of like Warren Buffett does. They're buying up large interests in great companies, and they understand the books of those companies. So kind of answer both sides of that. But the biggest thing is, they don't really get involved in the retail financial products that we get, oftentimes involuntarily put into today.
You said something interesting. They understand the books of those companies. And Warren Buffett is known for reading P&L statements, balance sheets, but more than just reading the P&L and the balance sheets, he reads the footnotes, because that's where the gold is, in the footnotes. And the reality is, I think the average investor has never picked up an annual report, has probably never looked at what's going on the balance sheet, and never at all glanced at the footnotes. They've gotten the tweet or the whatever the financial news networks are saying in the moment. And that's why I think Warren's been so successful, is he understands how to read those financial reports with his eyes closed. He's done so many of them, and he spends hours a day doing it. So it makes total sense.
I would add to that, even, the average person, they're usually investing in mutual funds. So they're not even investing in single stocks. And so if they own a mutual fund portfolio, they might have 30, 60 or 100 plus companies inside that portfolio. And, as you had pointed out, reading the books and the footnotes on just one company is something the average person's never done, let alone if it's, 100 of them. So I think at that point, the quote unquote diversification that's built into these financial products actually becomes a liability, because there's no way the average investor actually knows what's going on with every single one of those companies in their portfolio.
I'd be lucky if they knew what's going on with one.
Yeah, exactly.
So even before we get to that point, before you can start investing, you actually have to have money. And so there's this quote from the book that I enjoyed. And so you said you have to save money. I've honestly talked to people who are obsessed with investing, yet they give me a blank stare when I tell them to save money. How are you going to invest with no money? You must save your own money so that you can invest it into deals. If you aren't able to save 40% of your gross income and you have less than $50,000 of cash liquid right now, you're broke. That's some significant savings, and I guess cash, especially if you're young.
Yeah, it definitely is. And that statistic, actually, the 40% stat, there's a graph that I saw back in, this must have been in 2016. So I was in my early 20s. And this is where I saw this, is it showed the savings rate based on wealth class. And so it showed the historical average savings rate of the actual top 1% over the last 100 years is 40% of their gross income. And I was a financial advisor at the time telling people, just do your 401k match or try and do 10 to 15 cents or 15%. When I realized it needs to be almost triple that, that really changed my mindset. And it also helped me realize two things, Rocky, is number one, you can't save what you don't earn. And so I need to be earning enough where I could actually save 40%. If I'm only making $3,000 a month, there's no way I'm going to save 40% of my income. I think you need to be making at least $10,000 a month in order for that to be a real number. And then number two is, when I'm saving that much money, it makes me a more picky investor, right? If I'm only investing $1,000, I don't care if I lose it because it's not that much. But when I'm saving 40% of my income and I've got 50 grand put aside, now all of a sudden I'm worried about losing that 50 grand. And I'm not going to just put it into any old deal or any old investment account just to try and make a return. Because I remember everything I didn't buy in order to get that, in every hour I worked and every sale I made. And so it becomes a significant mindset change as an investor to, number one, protect that money. And then number two, make sure that I do get a good return on it.
And that's important. And I think in the United States, we probably all overspend. And I think it's probably shocking for people to think about the fact that you mean people actually save 40%. And just on what the cost of living is. And there are ways to do it, but you have to be intentional in the sense that when you buy your house, that locks you into a whole lot of stuff. And too often people probably buy more house than they can afford. And so that just sets them down a whole pattern where, hey, you've got a house in this neighborhood. Now I need a car to match. Now I need the lifestyle to go along with it. And so if you actually go back and start from the beginning and be intentional, you can figure out how to save a good chunk of your money. The problem that occurs, especially if you're a W-2 employee, is the government actually takes a big chunk.
Yeah.
And so that really kind of crushes that down. So the other part you talk about, and we're kind of chatting about it, is the ability to earn money. And I know these days everyone wants passive income. From what I found, passive income takes a lot of work. I don't know what your thoughts are.
Yeah. I believe there's no such thing as an absolute. So the statement of passive income would be an absolute. I don't think absolutes are actually attainable. It's varying degrees of greater or lesser of something. So I can have income that's more and more passive, right? But there's no such thing as totally passive income. Now, I have quite a bit of passive income, meaning it's on that further scale of I don't trade time for the income anymore. But as you said, it does take work, and you have to have active income in order to create passive income. And that's the part that I think gets overlooked is it's a cycle of earn in currency, save in stores of value, and then invest in income producing assets. And in order for me to get to that point of invest in income producing assets, I've got to do the save thing, and then I've got to do the earn thing. And it's quite a bit to get there. And when I first realized, because when I did my first $50,000 investment, I was making a 12% yield on it in passive income as a loan. And so I was like, man, this is great. I've got $500 a month coming in. That's awesome. And then I did the math and I was like, wait, 50,000 divided by $500 is going to take a long time before I get my principal back. And so I need to go create another 50,000 through earning and through saving again. So the passive income, just to give a kind of a truism for our listeners, the passive income happens in very small margins, right? You're going to get these drips of passive income, and over time they do accumulate. They do have a snowball effect. But the active income, they happen in very large volumes and quantities. You can go, if you're a business owner, you can go earn $50,000 this week, and it's a lot quicker to do that than it would be to try and get $50,000 through investing.
That's true. Each of them have their own leverage points, and you need to figure out what's the fastest way for you. Because as we talked about earlier, everyone's got advice. This one's conflicting with that one. And you kind of have to figure out for you what is the best way to do it, because we each have our unique strengths and we have our weaknesses. We have opportunities because of what knowledge we have or where we're located. And so you need to put that all together to figure out what's the best path for you.
Yeah. And I think that goes into, financial literacy at every level. That's a thing. And that's something that I harp on so much with my clients is doesn't matter where you're at with your finances. You should be spending time learning about money every day, learning about investing, learning about finances in some way. Even if it's a 10-minute YouTube video, it's better than nothing. And what that does is it helps you understand more and decide more what you like, what you don't like, what fits you, what doesn't, what meets your goals and objectives and what you want to stay away from, rather than just getting pigeonholed into one or two areas because that's all I understand and that's all I can really delve into.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man Podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man Podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And so one of the things that you talk about as far as the beginning investment is until you have 50,000 in the bank, you should only invest in your ability to produce the kind of income needed to save 50,000. Most people aren't doing that, are they?
They are not. Yeah, I would say that if we were to take a survey of personal development budgets, it would be pretty slim to none.
That doesn't surprise me. I've had many people on who've spent north of 7 figures on personal self-development. I know I've spent at least 6 figures plus on self-development. Haven't hit that 7-figure mark yet, but maybe one day. We'll see.
Yeah, and same for me. I mean, I'm probably mid 6 figures on it, and I'll hit the 7-figure marker for sure. But what I love about personal development is every time I've done it, there has been a return on investment. So it's very different than saying, because someone might hear 7 figures or even 6 figures on personal development, and it just is totally out of their world. It's like, how could you spend that on, events, books, courses, coaching, whatever? But when you look at it instead, okay, well, if I've spent, say $500,000 on personal development, I've probably made at least 3 times that directly as a result, right? And so that's where it becomes this thing of it's not really even an expense because it more than pays for itself. And even better than that is I love who I've become because of it. As an individual, as a free thinker, as someone that's able to analyze and look at data, like that's something that I've noticed and will never be taken away from me, regardless of the earnings that it brings or doesn't bring.
So how has it changed you?
I have become very level-headed. I'm able to look at and understand virtually anything. Like there's nothing I can't figure out and learn. And I don't think that I had that before. I had a lot of negative self-thinking, poverty mindset, relying on others' opinions for understanding rather than looking for myself and understanding from myself. And so, for me, the biggest change and the best way to communicate it is probably if I got robbed blind today, I could go out tomorrow and start rebuilding without missing a beat. And I don't think that that's something that I could have said about myself, 5-10 years ago.
That makes a lot of sense. One of the other things you talk about, and I love this because we do it all the time, and I've done it my whole life, is to create targets and review them.
Yeah.
And I don't think most people create targets and then figure out what the action steps are that are required to get them to that target, and then constantly reviewing it to make sure that it's happening.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think some of that comes from school. I think we're programmed to, pass the test and it's based on what someone else's opinion is of our performance. And then we move on based on that. And so, for me, I think I got into the targets through bodybuilding. I was a competitive bodybuilder through high school. I did that for several years after high school. So I had to set my own targets. There was if I enrolled in a show, I was going to walk on stage and how I looked would be how I looked. And there was nobody that was going to say, hey, you need to fix this and do that before you go out there. It's on my own merit. Right. And so I had to really look at, okay, well, here's how I want to appear. Here's how I want to feel. Here's how I want to look. What do I need to do to get there? And it's totally up to me to get there. I didn't have a teacher standing over me or an accountability partner or anything like that. Right. So I think that's where I developed it. But, I think with the average person, an easy way to start setting targets is find something doable and just go for it. And no different than you get the word target. It's like target practice. If you're firing at a target practice or you're trying to hit a target, you wouldn't just do it once and then regardless of outcome stop. You would keep doing it until you hit the level that you wanted to hit on that target or the accuracy that you were looking to achieve. And you would go back and you'd look at it and you'd critique yourself and you'd improve and you'd try again. And it could take, weeks, but as long as you do it, eventually you're going to hit that target.
Or come pretty close.
Which is improvement.
And if you've got a really big target, meaning a large, goal, coming close isn't all that bad, right?
It's not. That's true. As long as the graph is going up, I'm happy.
As long as the graph is going up. So are you still involved in bodybuilding or?
I don't compete. I still work out regularly. I think that is a big part of wealth is physical health. So that's something I still do. I enjoy it. I like to, I like to challenge myself. And so that's a great way to do that. as an entrepreneur, I got a lot of my mental toughness from putting, 400 pounds on my back and squatting down to the floor as many times as I could stand to. Right. So I think there's a lot to be said for it. And it's something I just like doing.
A lot of these things are tied together. And when you have success in one area, you have success in another. For example, if somebody loses weight, they start to work out, they get stronger. That also tends to flow into their financial lives, into their love lives, into their work lives. Like it crosses over. You just have to pick your one agent of change and go crush that. And then everything else will start to hopefully fall in line for you as well. And you'll see that success across different areas.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's one of the joys of achieving goals is you start in what area matters to you. And you may have experienced this too, Rocky, but as I achieve goals in one area, then I start getting my confidence up of, okay, now I can go tackle this area. And because I can tackle this area, now I can go tackle that area. And it really does become an exponential curve of winning, right? It ends up being all areas. And that's my definition of wealth is, abundance and prosperity and all dynamics of life. And it starts with one. You pick one and you just start working on it.
That makes total sense. So one of the things that we kind of talked about before we hit record was you've kind of changed your mindset to money is a resource to live abundantly.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about that. What does that mean to you?
To me, that means that, and money is a weird word. If we're talking about dollars, we actually should be calling it currency, right? Because it doesn't store value anymore. It used to when it was backed by gold. As we talked about earlier, that was an earth-shattering moment for me as a 17-year-old. But if we talk about this, just the standpoint of finance and economics, right? It really is a construct. It's a social construct. It was invented, before we had it. It didn't exist. We would just barter and exchange and fight and help and conquer and this and that. And then money became this coupon system of, okay, now we have an acceptable intermediary device and we can all exchange much easier and interact much easier. So when I look at like life, if I take money out of life and I just look at, okay, if I was just living the ideal life, what would it look like? Right. And I've done this, and this is an exercise I have my clients do where they write down and they describe what they would like every area of their life to look like. Right. And it doesn't have to be, out of this world. It doesn't have to be unreal, but it just has to be what matters to you and what would you like life to look like. And then the next question I ask is, okay, well, let's reintroduce economics into the equation and let's ask, how much per month would it cost you to live that way? And the answer is never what it is right now. My income now would never pay for my life that I'd want it to be ideally. And so it needs to be more. And so then it comes to the standpoint of, okay, well, we're either going to go for this life that we're saying we want to create, or we're not going to because we're not willing to create the financial means to pay for it. Right. The ideal life is expensive, and that's just how it is because there's all of these different groups I've got to exchange with. And so I've got to figure out how do I get the financial resources to pay for that? And that's then, okay, well, I'm either going to trade my time for money forever, or I'm going to figure out a way to have my investments pay for it so that the time and money exchange happens, but it's not my time involved. Right. And so it's kind of that thought process of, okay, well, then how do we build that? And so I think when we think about it that way, money is a tool and a resource. For me, it opened me up to, okay, well, money is not this like really sturdy thing that I have to have or don't have. And it's paper and it can hurt me or whatever. It's more like, okay, well, it's an idea. It's digits on a screen at this point. And, if I want to have X, it's going to cost this amount of those digits. And I need to figure out how I'm going to fund that.
Out of curiosity, since the dollar isn't backed by gold and it's essentially a social contract, what are your thoughts on crypto?
Yeah, I think crypto is at this point, an honest assessment is it's a speculation. By dictionary definition, it would be one. It doesn't act as a currency, meaning I think El Salvador is the only country that actually has literally accepted crypto as a currency. Ironically, all the citizens that got it sold it back for dollars for the most part. So it kind of failed that experiment. And so it's not performing the function of its title, and it never has in 12 years. Right. So I look at it, and for me, it's kind of like I would relate it to investing in a pre-revenue tech stock. It doesn't pay me a yield. It might go up in value, right? It's kind of like buying Tesla stock. My PE ratio is going to be terrible. I could probably get a better one in a bank account. Maybe it goes up in price and I can sell it to someone else for more. I do think the technology behind crypto, I think blockchain, I think that that's useful. I think that that will be capitalized upon just like the internet was. And then it's just a matter, okay, which great company is going to integrate that into, payment systems and, the idea of NFTs. I'm a big gold investor. If you could give me a physical gold bar that had a digital token so that I could transfer the token around, but keep possession of the gold in my storage, I would love that. Right. So I think that there are definite uses for the technology behind crypto. I don't think it's going to be a currency. If we do end up with one, it's going to be a central bank, digital currency, which is not really the same nuance as a crypto or a DeFi like most people would say it is today.
And the central bank is looking at creating their own digital currency. It's probably sooner versus later, and it'll be out, and that will somehow change the game. What it will be, I don't know. How things will end up, I don't know. So you talked a little bit in the beginning about people who are wealthy use alternative assets. Can you share some of the different alternative assets and maybe a plus or minus on each one?
Yeah. So this was a whole world I got into because I was a financial advisor. So I did stocks and bonds and mutual funds. I help clients with that. To give a couple of terms to open this conversation up. So there's something called an accredited investor. An accredited investor, to give you the simple answer, is an individual with $1 million net worth or higher, not including the value of their primary residence. When somebody becomes an accredited investor, they are allowed to invest in something called a private placement investment. Private placement means it's not registered with the SEC as a retail investment. It's not going to be in a mutual fund. The average person not only can't buy it, but they're not allowed to be advertised to about it. So the average Joe, and for me, even as a financial advisor, I never knew what it was. I didn't come across it. When I finally did hear about it, it was like Bigfoot, right? Like it was just this thing where I was like, what is this? So when I started researching it, private placement investments, also known as alternative assets, are really where the wealthy store and invest a lot of their money. There's so many of them out there, right? To give an easy example, before Uber became a company that everyone could start investing in, they had a pre-IPO, and basically that was a private round of financing and funding that was only open to accredited investors. So if somebody was going to invest in an Uber, and I think a lot of these tech companies do this, it's reserved for the wealthy. There's no way the average person's going to hear about it, and basically that's an opportunity for wealthy individuals to get in on the investment before the general public does. Right. So that can be in the tech space. You can also do it with real estate, private lending, oil and gas investing, foreign currency trading. There's so many of these different opportunities out there, but the barrier to entry is first becoming an accredited investor. And then also some of the other things we talked about, having the money to invest, making sure before that you're solvent, you've got the education to check off a couple of boxes.
So when it comes to these, one of the things that I have found is it's not always easy to judge them because there isn't a standard. A lot of it comes down literally to trust.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to determine trust until you're in a bad spot. And nobody wants to be in a bad spot to begin with. So how do you vet these?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I first got into private placement investing, I was very, very lucky. My best friend since middle school, his dad ran a fund, and I didn't know this, right? So when I was 12, 13 years old, I would always see his family didn't work. I didn't know why. Somehow they never worked and they always had money, which was not how my family worked. If we didn't work, we didn't have money, and I would realize, we didn't work, right? So when I started to learn about this industry, I sat down with him and I was like, hey, what is it that you do? Can you give me more info on it? And so he described a private placement fund. So he was someone I knew since 7th grade. And so I still do my investing with him today, among other funds, but he was my first private placement investment. And, I grew up working on the homes in his fund, helping him clean out nasty trailers that he was buying for his trailer park portfolio, or helping with a flip that he was working on. So that trust was there. And I knew for a fact that was somebody that was going to do a good job. And so I was able to start with that. Today, when I invest in private placement funds, a couple of rules. I have to like the fund. I have to understand what they do. My rules, if I can't draw it on a napkin, it's not a good idea. It has to fit me as an investor. I like hard assets. I like real estate. I like passive income. So it's got to fit that. It's got to fit my goals and objectives as well. So my goal being achievement of passive income greater than savings, expenses, and taxes. It's got to actually do that for me or contribute to that. And then I'm never going to overpay for it. So, it's got to be like, if I'm putting in 50,000, I know that the earnings rate or the potential that I'm getting is going to give me a good ROI, and I'm not just overpaying for something I could go get retail. So those are a couple of things. And then I don't invest in a private placement fund that has not done their SEC filings. There's a lot of them that don't. When you have money and you're like, hey, I'm looking for investments, everyone and their cousin is going to tell you they have a deal, right? So I look at, show me your private placement memorandum, show me your SEC filings. I need to see 5 years of profit before I'll put money into it. And then I need to be able to verify that they have always paid their investors. So that's a long laundry list, which means probably 1 out of 100 deals I don't look at, or I end up doing 99 I don't look at. They come across my desk or my email and I get rid of them.
That's not very passive.
It's not. Once you find one, the first one it never is. Once you find a good one, then it can be passive. But getting into it is not passive.
Correct. It takes a lot of work to figure it out. You said something very interesting. You said, I don't invest in something that I don't understand and can't put on the back of a napkin.
Yeah. And I think that was something I actually learned from the gentleman I mentioned, and so that was when I realized that. And at the time, again, I was selling mutual funds. It was funny because I tried to put mutual funds on the back of a napkin, couldn't do it. I got a 95% on my exam to sell those things. And so I couldn't simplify it down to the level of let me take this entire concept and put it on a napkin. So I do that now. If I can't put something on a napkin, I don't invest in it. And I think that that's a great rule for anybody because it brings it to the level of if I have a great deal of understanding, I can, right? So it doesn't mean never do the deal. It means if I can't put it on a napkin, there's probably things that I don't understand yet as an investor. And so because of that, I should stay out of that zone. Risk is actually created by lack of understanding. The riskiest equation in most investments is the investor themselves. So if I can mitigate that through understanding and get to the point of, okay, I could take a foreign currency trading fund and put that on the back of a napkin, that speaks volumes of my financial literacy level. If I can't, I just need to go learn more. And until I'm ready, play in the space that I do understand.
And that takes the commitment to go learn and to understand and to dig through the opportunities. And, you said 1 out of 100 for private placement, even in the world of real estate, because I flipped houses and buy rentals. And today the numbers are like that. There's so many so-called opportunities coming up, but you've got to sift through a lot of them to find the ones that truly are worthwhile, because most of them are not that great, or there are underlying cash flow issues or problems that people don't take the time to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just important to understand the numbers, meaning the ratios, that you've got to go through a lot of deals before you get a good one. And I think what happens to a lot of people is they go see 10 houses and they give up.
Yeah.
It's just not enough. You got to keep looking. You got to keep talking. You got to keep finding opportunity until you learn how to do that better.
Yeah. And I think to speak to your point, the other thing that I see that happens is people look at one house and buy it. And that's also a mistake. I forget the name of the movie. There's a Tom Hanks movie. It's back in the 80s, maybe, where they buy a project house and, they spend the entire movie, everything breaks and they're spending all their lives fixing it and they're unemployed and about to get divorced. And it can be that way. Like if you don't look at enough and you make the decision that I just want the title of investor, and then I jump into the fourplex or the duplex or the whatever without understanding all of the aspects and the ins and outs and what I'm getting into, it does turn into, a second job that doesn't pay very well. So both sides of it is you have to have the longevity of not giving up, but also you need to go the distance before you do pull the trigger.
I watched that movie. It was called The Money Pit.
That's the one. Yeah. Hilarious movie.
And it's not hard to figure these things out. When you buy a 100-year-old house, nothing is standard.
Right.
I mean, I grew up in those. The window sizes aren't standard. Even the front door size isn't standard. It wasn't until probably about the 30s or 40s that they started standardizing things. And those houses had knob and tube wiring, not even up to code in the sense of how they do things. And it was actually plaster walls. So they put plaster onto framework to create that, no sheetrock. And if you know what you're doing and you know how to replumb and rewire, there's opportunity there. And now that's the other thing that's changed. The type of materials that are available today to redo a house with have become so much easier to work with, especially for plumbing. It used to be you'd have to, sweat copper pipe. Today you can run PEX everywhere. And the older houses had a little bit more height to the ceilings. So you can create false ceilings and run all your stuff and do all kinds of wild things, but you have to know how to do it. Again, it comes back to learning. Yeah.
And I think that, we talked about the private placements. Usually there's what I call a deal maker. There's somebody like you that knows this stuff, right? And then there's somebody like me that doesn't want to do any of that. And that's where a great opportunity to invest comes in, because I have capital, you have an opportunity and know-how. And in the right circumstances, with the right trust, relationship, background, track record, that can be very profitable for both parties. And I think that that's the epitome of a good private placement deal.
How often do these deals go bust?
Very often. Yeah. If you get in the wrong ones, it can be not only bust, it can be straight up fraud. Right. And so that's where you have to really, really vet them well. Like I talked about, those ratios of maybe 1 out of 100 deals. I had a person that invested not in any of the funds that I use, but before she became a client, she's like, yeah, I invested in foreign currency, and the guy would just walked away with $100,000. And it's not that hard to hire a VA to create fake trading reports and make it all look official. But at the end of the day, it comes to the point of, okay, I need my money. If I can't get it, that's a problem. And I don't know that happens until it happens. So they can go bust. There can be fraud. I think the SEC is starting to crack down on that more and do more investigation, but that is what it is. And they're not very well staffed. So you have to really rely on your own know-how and your own network, and really be able to not trust the person, but trust the numbers, and then also be able to see the track record and assume that, all of those things are accurate, but you've got to be able to verify it all.
And I would not expect the government to protect me, because they won't.
Yeah. What they'll do is they'll fine the person so that they get some revenue. Yeah. And that's the extent of it.
And good luck with you and that's what happened with Bernie Madoff. Like the people, and I never realized this. You think, oh, I'm going to get in the Ponzi early and get out. Mm-hmm. The people who got out of Bernie Madoff early and got paid out, the government went after them and said, that's not your money. It was stolen. And they went after them for the excesses that they got.
Yeah. Any investment could be that. That's the problem, is any investment could be that until you pass that break-even point. And Bernie had a great track record. Everyone knew him. He was on the boards of many of the exchanges. Like he was investing with, high-level politicians and Fortune 100 executives. So you really do have to know who you're working with.
And that is very true. You really do. So right now you're doing Wealth DynamX. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's all about?
Yeah. So Wealth DynamX is my company. And so basically we focus on, helping families and individuals gain financial education, become solvent, and then achieve greater levels of financial freedom in their lives. And a big focus is we want more truth about money to be available. And what better way than by example, right? So a lot of our clients are, business owners, families, moms, dads, teachers, doctors. And so when you meet someone that's doing well financially, and it's not the normal, we drive 2 German vehicles we can't afford, and we live in a house that costs 40% of our income, and we've got 6 figures in student loan debt. When you talk to someone that's not in that, you can just tell that there's a difference, and you might not be able to put a finger on it, but there is a difference. And so we help our clients do that. And so really, for me, that's what I would have liked to have, because I didn't have that growing up as a kid. I didn't have somebody that I knew was doing well with money that could give me help or just be an example even. So, we work with our clients on all of those things. We're very big on, alternative assets, hard assets, investing in things that have been around a long time, gaining financial education. You mentioned taxes. We're very big on helping reduce those. I think, more money kept to ourselves is a better thing than less. So yeah, that's kind of what my company is about.
Very cool. And we'll put a link into that as well.
Awesome.
So we always like to have people take action every week. Is there an action step that you can recommend people to do this week to move forward in their life?
I would say to pick one, I would challenge if you're a listener, I would challenge you to, for the next 90 days, make it a 90-day challenge, spend at least 10 minutes a day learning about finances. And if you do that after 90 days, what you'll find is it will become a habit. It'll become something you do without thinking about it. But the exponential growth and dividends and certainty that you'll gain financially from just 10 minutes a day, it really is unbelievable. So I would say that that's something actionable that everyone could go do right now.
And that it is. And I still spend time constantly learning about money, always learning about new opportunities, new ways to invest, how other people are doing it, and looking at just constantly improving. And then also with taxes, because taxes are constantly changing. So understanding the different tax codes and how can I do a better job with that? The reality is if you plan on getting wealthy, you need to spend time understanding money and how to use it, and also just keeping track of it. And wise choice right there.
Thank you. Yep, I agree. And not only getting wealthy, but staying there once you've achieved it.
It's a lot harder to be poor after you're wealthy.
It is.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I think abundance starts within me. So I would say my secret to living an abundant life is really to understand myself, and seek to understand others as a result of that too. I think life comes down to the interactions we have around us, and those build upon and turn into everything else. So that would be my secret is, understand myself and others, and be in good standing with myself and others too.
I think that's the one thing everyone ignores is the reflection in the mirror.
Yeah.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
That is a great question. I would say if I would have learned sooner that I could learn anything, right? I had this idea that certain knowledge was reserved for people that had certain status or achievement or pedigree. And all learning comes down to words. All words come down to definitions and understanding what those words mean, which means any subject, as long as I know the process of doing that, any subject is up for grabs. And I didn't know that until, a couple of years ago. Right. So if I would have known that when I was, 12, 13, 14 years old, I think school would have been much more interesting and life just would have been that much fun, more fun, that much faster.
And I think the internet has changed that by making information readily available. Now the problem is figuring out what's right, what's wrong. But that's the premise of classical education. So classical education is teaching you how to learn the vocabulary of the language of what you want to learn, and then figuring out how to then from there, once you learn the language, then you learn how to do it. And then it's practice and you keep doing it. And eventually everything is figure outable.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
I would say find someone to apprentice with. Right. And I don't say mentor because mentor can mean so many things. Specifically, when you look back, in the early 1900s and prior, a young guy, I was a young guy before, they find an apprentice. They find one person that's successful and they often work with them and add value to them and learn the trade. And they'll do that for years until they become a master in that area too. So, maybe we'll turn this into two things. Find an area you love and then find an apprentice in that area.
Yeah, there's no use finding an apprentice doing something you hate.
Yeah. But that is what most people do today.
It is what most people do today. And I think, it's a concept that needs to come back is that apprenticeship. And I think the one thing that would really surprise people is successful people like to surround themselves and be part of other people's success. And I think a lot of people don't understand that. And so if you are younger and you have the ability to meet these people, as you said, you show up, you do the work. Right now, finding people who will show up and do the work is almost impossible. So when you do that, you are essentially a golden nugget for somebody, and they will be more than happy to work with you and help you to achieve it. And if you can't find those people, keep looking, because they are out there.
They exist. Yeah.
They exist. So you have a giveaway for our audience today. Would you like to share what that is and where people can find out more about you and connect?
I do, yeah. So I'd like to give away a free chapter of my book. We talked a lot about it today, but if you go to jerryfetta.com/free chapter, I think Rocky will have that in the show notes. It's feta like the cheese, but with 2 T's in it because it's twice as good. So jerryfetta.com/free chapter. And then to connect with me, I'm on all the social platforms. I would say I'm the most active on Instagram. So if you want to go to Instagram at Jerry Fetta, but I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. So whatever your platform is, if you go look me up, you'll find me. And we do a ton of free content. So even on that note of financial education, between articles and videos and posts, you probably could spend 10 minutes a day there and do just fine with it.
And we will make sure to put that all into the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you, Rocky.
That was a great review of the basics of wealth building is all about and how those who are successful look at money. The reality is we can learn anything if we choose to invest the time into it. I will admit it, I stay away from a lot of investments because I don't want to spend the time to learn them. Some of them are boring, and it's tedious to go through all the paperwork. The other issue is it's hard to measure trust. Bernie Madoff is the perfect example of that. There are ways to make your money grow, find the one that works for you, and do it. And then create that massive gap, because savings is where the wealth is built. What works for you and your life in wealth building? That is the question, because this is personal finance. It's all about your personal needs, wants, and desires. Know your savings rates, know your earnings rates, figure out the gap, and make it grow. And then invest that money and make it bigger. This week's action step: take 10 minutes a day for the next 90 days to learn about finances. As I said before, I am always focused on this because I look at my personal finances as running my own small business. So I want to improve it. I look at my targets. I see how I'm moving towards them. I've been doing this for over 30 years, and it works. There's a lot of bad information in the personal finance world, and there's a lot of outdated information. But the key principles are always true. Spend less than you make, invest, make the money grow, compounding do its miracle. Just keep in track and adjust, and you too can be wealthy. The question is how fast, and that's up to you. Next week, we've got on Ramon Ray to chat about thinking big. He is super high energy. You're going to love it. If you enjoyed today's episode, I'd appreciate you sharing it with a friend. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.